Thank you all. I'm going to get stage fright. Rebecca, thank you. That was more than gracious. She still calls me Mr. Curtis. I try to get my students to, makes me feel youthful to call me by my first name. It's the way we do it in journalism anyway. But Rebecca is the epitome of a great student, and I'm so glad she's gone on to do what she's doing here at the Clinton School. Thank you. It's fun to be with you again, and to meet your fiance too. And it's fun to be back in Little Rock. I see some friends from the Clinton campaign. Bruce, thank you for coming out, and Skip Rutherford, who I see from time to time, either here or at Ole Miss. I covered the 92 Clinton campaign and logged just about enough time to register to vote here at the Capitol Hotel, but you all treated us probably better than press corps deserve here, and had a lot of fun. It's fun to be back. I'm honored to be here, so thank you very much for the invitation. I had written a couple of books, and I never thought I would write another one, but in the fall of 2007, when Dickie Scruggs, a very prominent lawyer in Oxford, was arrested a couple of days after Thanksgiving, and it occurred to me almost immediately, this would make quite a book. And it's just kind of stuff falling out of the trees in my lap. I knew so many of the characters involved, and I felt that perhaps Dick would talk with me and provide insight into it. And so I dropped him a note, and I told him of my interest. And he called me shortly after I sent the note, and he sounded a bit shell-shocked, and understandably. And he said, I'm not ready to talk to anybody right now. He says, we're still trying to connect the dots. So without any aid from him, I began working on the book. And I discovered that like Dickie Scruggs and other defendants, I too was trying to connect the dots, and there were so many of them out there, far more than I ever knew at the beginning. Fortunately, I went to Ole Miss and knew a lot of the people who were involved. I knew the federal judge who was presiding. I knew some of the federal prosecutors, and Judge Biggers never talked to me, but a number of other federal officials did. And I was drawing from all these various sources, people that I knew, and I discovered so many people were willing to talk, that these lawyers hated each other in Mississippi. They either were allied with Scruggs or hated his guts and were going to do anything they could to destroy him and he them. I thought when I first started, I was going to be dealing with a story about white-collar crime, that it would involve this description of the attempted bribery of a state judge in Mississippi. I'd get into some of the colorful personalities, and then the book would, climax would be at this sensational trial. Well, it turned out that that wasn't what I wound up writing about at all. It developed, I was dealing with a political story and not a story about the bribery of a judge. It was like these Russian dolls that, you know, you open up and there's another one to open up, another one, peel back and peel back. And I wound up with a story, I think, far more interesting and very different from the story that we were following in the newspapers, because at that time, the narrative of the story was being controlled by the prosecutors, and Scruggs, his lawyer, had basically imposed a gag rule on his own client, and they were not responding. So the public is thinking this is basically a hard and fast case involving the bribery of a judge. It turned out to be quite different from that. Eventually, all 7 of the defendants in 2 separate bribery cases pleaded guilty, so it was never a trial. And by the end of the year 2008, it seemed the story was all over. but was it? It became clear to me that the story that we'd been following, which was based on a $40,000 payoff, really involved squabbles of hundreds of millions of dollars between a number of lawyers, and these are the guys who hate each other. I also found, even more importantly, that I was dealing with a lot of players in an old organization that had basically been running the state of Mississippi all my life. It was originally called the Old Eastland Organization, named for Senator Jim Eastland. Now, I don't know whether you ever had a corresponding organization in Arkansas, but I know, like Mississippi, Arkansas is a small state, a tight state, and everybody knows everybody. And same thing is true in Mississippi. So they've got all of these incredible connections. Eastland had these people, quiet agents in all the courthouses in the state who did his bidding. And when Senator Eastland passed from the scene, the operation basically was inherited by Trent Lott, who happens to be Dick Scruggs' brother-in-law. And no problem that they're moving from a nominally Democratic figure to a Republican one. They're all very conservative party politics. Really didn't make a whole lot of difference. There's another interesting aspect that there's a subdivision of the organization that Senator Lott developed, and it is composed entirely of members of his fraternity at Ole Miss, the Sigma News. It's quite extraordinary. Lott won't hire anybody in his office unless they're a Sigma Nu. And all these fairly prominent people, very much linked to Trent Lott. In this story, among the figures who are Sigma News from Ole Miss, Senator Roger Wicker took Trent's seat. I went to school with Trent, so I can call him Trent. A federal judge named Alan Pepper, the U.S. attorney who prosecuted the case, Jim Greenlee, and importantly, a figure in Washington who I describe as Trent Lott's alter ego, Tom Anderson, and even Zach Scruggs, Dick Scruggs' son, was a Sigma News. It's kind of an interesting assembly. Scruggs had another name for these agents of the old Eastland organization. Scruggs called them the dark side of the force. So they were kind of quietly going around and fixing cases or making sure they were prosecuting their enemies, blocking legislation or ensuring legislation is passed. In reporting the story, I had a number of important breakthroughs. And I think the first real one was when Scruggs decided to talk with me. And this was after he had pleaded guilty but was awaiting sentencing. So there was about a 6-week period where Scruggs began to talk, and he talked and he talked. And my wife Nancy will remember one day he came to our house at about 10 in the morning, and it was in the summer, and he left at nightfall, so he would have been there about 10 hours talking about the case. I think Dick wanted to talk to me not to claim he was innocent, but basically to try to at least explain how he got involved in this story. And as he told me at another time when I talked to him after he had gone off to prison, he looked at me rather plaintively and he says, "When you're finished, are you going to be able to tell me how I got involved with all these people?" So I tried, and that's kind of the heart of the story. How I learned that this thing had such political ramifications was one story that Dick told me, and I already knew part of it. I had first met him when I was still a reporter for the Boston Globe, and I was on the Gulf Coast doing a story about these squabbles over money between Scruggs and some former lawyers, and I was told at the time, confidentially, that he had nearly been indicted in a case that involved contingency fees that he had received for working on asbestos cases for the state and without proper authorization. And I knew that he had not been ultimately indicted. I didn't know why. Dick told me one day, he said that he, after learning he was about to be indicted, he called up Trent Lott said, "I need help." Shortly thereafter, he gets a phone call from a guy named P.L. Blake, who at the time lived in Greenwood and is the quintessential agent in the dark side of the force in the old Eastland organization. P.L. Blake asked Dick to come to Greenwood and see him. Says, "I hear you got some problems." So Dick flew in his plane to Greenwood, met with Blake, and Blake says, "Stick around for a few minutes. Somebody's coming here that I want you to meet." In walks the door a man named Steve Patterson, who at the time was state auditor, and he was the guy who was bringing the charges against Scruggs. Incidentally, Scruggs was going to be prosecuted by the Hinds County, that's Jackson, district attorney, a man named Ed Peters. It was all set up. And it was intended to basically bring down this upstart, young, rising trial lawyer, Dick Scruggs, but also to tarnish the Attorney General, who was a close ally of Scruggs, Mike Moore. Anyway, P.L. Blake, once he gets Steve Patterson into the house, tells Patterson, "Forget about it. You're not going to indict anybody. You're going to drop the case." Patterson dropped the case right there. They went to three of them, Scruggs, P.L. Blake, and Steve Patterson went off to a nice restaurant in Lusco's. It was the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Remember those names, P.L. Blake, Steve Patterson, and Ed Peters, as well as Trent Lott's associate in Washington, Tom Anderson, because they are major players in what Scruggs called the dark side of the force, and they're members of a network that basically took their orders from Trent Lott. As the 2007 case unfolded against Scruggs, all of these men would have a role, and it also became apparent to me as I obtained documents after documents that all of them were getting millions of dollars from Scruggs' tobacco fees. And this was another breakthrough for me in gathering my information, was getting these documents. I got a flow chart showing where all these, literally hundreds of millions of dollars are going to people. It's pretty astonishing. It's breathtaking. Scruggs' split of the various tobacco settlements will amount, when all the payout is finished in 2025, $1.6 billion. He assigned about a third of it to one lawyer who fronted most of the money, a guy named David Nutt, who lives outside of Jackson. And about another $600 million went to all sorts of characters, some of them very legitimate legal associates of Scruggs, but some of them raises real questions. What did they do to get this money? Steve Patterson, who would wind up being part of the conspiracy in this bribery case, and went to prison for it. We learned that he's getting $80,000 a month indirectly from the Scruggs tobacco money. He's getting it through yet another lawyer named Joey Langston, who also went to prison, who's getting $4 million a year from Scruggs for what Langston did to fix a related tobacco case. Ed Peters, who was the district attorney up until a few years ago in Jackson, got roughly $1 million to represent Scruggs secretly in a second case that was before Judge Bobby DeLauder in Jackson. And Peters is basically going to use his influence because DeLauder had been Peters' deputy district attorney, and the two of them were the ones that were in the movie Ghost of Mississippi. They were the ones who led the prosecution against DeLay Beckwith in that famous case in which Beckwith was convicted for the murder of Medgar Evers years before. In fact, Alec Baldwin played DeLauder in that movie, and DeLauder had kind of heroic stature in Mississippi. DeLauder's in federal prison today too. P.L. Blake was not indicted, but we know that he gets roughly $2 million a year out of the Scruggs money and will in the end get a total of $50 million. When he was asked in one deposition what he did to get the money, he said, well, I clip newspapers and I keep Dick informed. So we all are ready to take up jobs clipping newspapers. Tom Anderson, Trent Lott's man in Washington, has, so far as I know, never been investigated, but he's been getting about $1.5 million a year. It's routed through a corporation with an address in Virginia. The corporation is not registered with the Secretary of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Lott himself was questioned by the FBI and members of the U.S. Attorney's Office, but one might note that the FBI agent as well as the U.S. Attorney are both Sigma News. Lott announced his resignation from the Senate on a Monday. Scruggs' office was raided on a Tuesday, and Scruggs was indicted and arrested on a Wednesday. It seems an extraordinary coincidence. I have to say, in fairness to Trent, I was unable to come up with a connection, so as far as I know, it was nothing more than an extraordinary connection. So have I lost you? Are you still with me? I know there are a lot of players. When I realized I had so many characters in the front of the book, I read War and Peace a few years ago and was aided immeasurably by Tolstoy's cast of all these Russian names and characters. So I stuck a list of 34 principal characters, I think, to try to keep it straight. While I was trying to untangle this money trail, I had another important breakthrough. I was given a complete set of the FBI wiretaps that had been going on for about 6 months. And listening to all these many hours of intercepted conversations, I developed a far different picture about the case involving Judge Lackey and the bribe that was supposedly offered him than the story that was being presented by the prosecution. The U.S. Attorney's Office only made selective tapes part of the public record. They never released most of it. If you listen to all of it, you wind up with quite a different story. Some newspapers to this day are still saying that the case developed when this young lawyer, Tim Balducci, offered a $40,000 bribe on Scruggs' behalf to Judge Henry Lackey. Well, it's very clear that nobody ever offered Judge Lackey any money, neither Balducci nor Scruggs nor any associate of Scruggs. What happened was this: Balducci, who was starting a new firm with his partner, Steve Patterson, remember him? He was the guy that was going to prosecute Scruggs a few years before. They're trying to get started and they want to kind of hang their future on Scruggs' rising star. So they want to do anything they can to get in good with Scruggs. They learned that one of the cases where Scruggs is a defendant, it's a civil case, has gone to this country judge named Henry Lackey. Balducci says, aha, I know Judge Lackey. He's my mentor. Let me go down and see if I can ask him to do a favor. And so Scruggs and his son and another associate in the firm all said, fine, go do it. It's improper, it's unethical, I never heard the term before, but it's what's known as earwigging. And some of you who are lawyers may have known it. I never heard of it, kind of archaic term. That's what Balducci did. He went down improperly, asked the judge to basically send the case to arbitration. There's never any money passed at that time. It turns out Judge Lackey was no fan of Dick Scruggs. In fact, he didn't like trial lawyers, period. Judge Lackey is also a very conservative Republican. Dick Scruggs, despite his relationship with Trent Lott, is essentially a progressive Democrat who bankrolled virtually all the Democratic candidates in Mississippi. So when Balducci asked Judge Lackey to do a favor for Scruggs, it's kind of like a lightning bolt. And so Judge Lackey thinks about it for 2 weeks. He then goes to the U.S. Attorney's Office and reports this improper approach. The U.S. attorneys like the idea of going after Scruggs too, so they call in the FBI. Judge Lackey agrees to wear a body wire. They can tap his phone, and they can even install video equipment in his office, hidden video equipment, and they do. Judge Lackey begins calling Balducci to try to reel him in. Balducci becomes troubled, and he calls Judge Lackey. He says, Judge Lackey, I'm sorry, and I'm afraid I made you uncomfortable. I'm so sorry I did this. I feel terrible. All this is recorded on wiretaps that I have. Judge Lackey recused himself. The next day, an FBI agent is in his office saying, you can't give up on this case. The federal prosecutors put pressure on Judge Lackey, get back in the case. You got to ask for money, and you got to make sure Scruggs' name is associated with it. Nothing happened. This thing goes on for 6 months. Finally, they say, Judge Lackey, you've got to be explicit with Balducci. So Judge Lackey calls Balducci and says, Tim, I've created a hump for myself. Financial problems. I need help. If I do a favor for Dick Scruggs, will he help me? And Balducci, without ever asking, Scruggs says, oh, absolutely, Judge. So Judge Lackey asked for $40,000. Balducci happens to have what he calls a slush fund. He starts delivering cash to Judge Lackey. It's all on videotape. I've got those videotapes too, extraordinary, throwing packets of money on the judge's table. Scruggs at this time doesn't know what's going on, but Balducci certainly wants to be reimbursed for this money he's paying out. So who do they call to make sure that they're going to get their money back? P.L. Blake, the very guy who killed the case 15 years before. P.L. Blake once again calls upon Scruggs, come on over and see me in Birmingham, where P.L. Blake now lives. Scruggs flies over there. P.L. Blake says, the boys in New Albany, that's Balducci and Patterson, done you a favor. It cost them $40,000. Scruggs, who has a history of throwing money at problems, thinks nothing of it, goes back to Oxford, authorizes a check for $40,000, and he's in the soup too. He's clearly implicated. He's become part of what's very clearly a criminal enterprise. So all of this is captured on wiretaps. Balducci is finally delivers the last of the money. It's videotaped. As soon as he walks out of the judge's office, the FBI grabs him. They take him to Oxford. He begins pouring it out. He never even asked for a lawyer to represent him. Among the things Balducci said, and this is one other thing that's very clear from the wiretaps, and I happen to have a transcript of the grand jury testimony. People gave me all sorts of information. They gave me sealed court records. It was incidentally, people were trying to find out what P.L. Blake was doing with the money. One of the litigants against Scruggs subpoenaed these bank records. Those records were sealed by federal judge Alan Pepper, Trent Lott's roommate and Sigma Nu fraternity brother. Anyway, Balducci goes before the grand jury and says that the whole thing was Zach Scruggs' idea, and that when he was wearing a body wire for the FBI, he said that to further implicate everyone, that Judge Lackey was demanding another $10,000. The U.S. prosecutor leading him on says, and what was their reaction? Balducci said, they said it would be no problem. Well, there's absolutely nothing like that that took place in that conversation, because I've got the entire conversation. It was a body wire, I've got the conversation. He lied, and the U.S. prosecutors knew he lied. Zach Scruggs went off to prison with his father and others. He's now fighting to have his conviction erased, and he's got a hearing before Federal Judge Biggers next month in Oxford. The case raises any number of questions beyond the puzzle of why Dick Scruggs got himself tied up with the dark side of the force in the first place. The questions about the tactics that the federal authorities used, questions about Judge Lackey's motivation. None of this excuses Dick. He is, as he said in open court, he's guilty of taking part, albeit late, in the conspiracy. And I should say, and I hadn't made that clear, Dick is a friend of mine. I've known Dick for a number of years, but so were so many other people, judges, prosecutors, whatever. But I do want to make it clear that Dick is a friend, so kind of get that out of the way. Dick, I should add, without divulging too much of private conversation, Dick was not particularly pleased by the book either. In fact, hardly anybody liked the book who's in it. But anyway, I was able to develop this amazing, complex tale largely through the cooperation of so many people on all sides. It was not just two sides. There were 8 or 10 different sides. I talked to upwards of 200 people who were interviewed, some of them multiple times. I was given, as I said, all sorts of documents, old depositions, sealed court documents, the money, the cash flow charts that showed where the money's going, the wiretaps. So I had a lot of information. The Fall of the House of Zeus was published nearly 6 months ago. So far, there's only been one inaccuracy pointed out to me. That took place over in Greenwood a few months ago. I was overdoing a signing, and there's a anecdote in the first chapter after Scruggs and P.L. Blake and Steve Patterson decide that the case is going to be dropped. They go to Lusco's, very popular restaurant in Greenwood, which I knew. And I think I was being too alliterative, but I described the menu as being prime rib, pork chops, and pompano. And people in Greenwood insist Lusco's has never served pork chops. So I retract that. I retract nothing else. So thank you all, and I'm happy to take any questions that you've got. I see John Brummett over there too.
It occurred to me after I turned the last page of your wonderful book that the most sinister and possibly evil character in the book was not Dickie Scruggs, but Judge Lackey. Would you comment on that?
Some people have come to that conclusion. I tried not to come to any, to deliver my own conclusion. I've had a number of people who felt that he was unduly manipulative. I've had lawyers tell me if I had been a judge and this young man who looked up to me came in with this improper approach, that I would have scolded him. I would have said, I'm going to forget you said that, but don't you dare ever say anything like that again. I've had a number of people say that. But oddly enough, I've had other people say, I really liked your book, and I think that Judge Lackey is a great hero. So different people have drawn different conclusions from the book. I tried to be as fair and honest and accurate as I could in reflecting all these different perspectives. I will say that Judge Lackey would not talk to me. Trent Lott would not talk to me. P.L. Blake would not talk to me. So you can draw some inferences there. I'll also say that Judge Lackey, even before the book was published, was saying that I had been paid $750,000 by Scruggs to write the book, which I thought was kind of funny at first, and then I thought about it, and it was downright insulting. So Anyway, Judge Lackey and I are, we're not exactly chums, and we don't have coffee together, but I'll let you reach that conclusion. I won't try to dissuade you of that.
Question? Yes, back here.
I was a fraternity brother with Dickie Scruggs, and
Phi Alpha.
Haley Barber was in there. But I think on Scruggs, we called him Zeus, not because he was a looking Greek god. We called him Zeus because he was so old looking when he was in college.
I had to run that past him.
Check with that mess.
I got that story from Johnny Morgan.
Well, Johnny Morgan, he's full of BS anyway. Okay. He can't do this. I'm telling you, he was always known as Zeus because he was so old. Yeah. He just looked old when he was a freshman.
Okay, well, Johnny told me that for those that's in the book, that Dick was shaving one day at the SAE house and collective bathroom, and he really didn't care very much about it. He still exercises a lot, cares about his appearance, and he looked very satisfied in the mirror and slapped his cheeks, says, "Oh, you great Greek god, don't you ever die." And as they do at fraternities at Ole Miss, someone immediately called him Zeus. That's the story I heard. I too was a member of that fraternity. Again, full disclosure, but I was way before you guys were. But it was an interesting class. Haley Barber and Dick were pledge brothers in that class. So I guess the SAEs have a little political network too.
Question, let's see. Yes, sir, right here. She'll get you the mic.
I grew up in Moss Point, Mississippi, down the street from Bobby Kayite, so all the characters on the Gulf Coast, the Sons of the Beach, you got very accurate. George Dale was my high school basketball coach, who became insurance commissioner, was involved in that. I've often wondered, after reading about the incident with Joe Kalingo and George Shaddix being drunk, going from the Pascagoula Country Club over to the yacht club, that when they concocted the story that George was having a heart attack, what doctor did they call to meet him at the Singing River? Was it Perry Hockaday or
I don't
Teddy
know.
Millett?
More full disclosure, I roomed with George Shattuck, and Kalingo was a running mate of mine at Ole Miss. It was actually a pediatrician, they told me, who knew nothing about a heart attack.
That would have been Millett.
They were feigning to beat the ticket. They got pulled over by the state police, and they'd been speeding. They were drunk, and they said, "We're rushing him to the hospital. He's had a heart attack."
Well, I really would like to say that you, Paul Miner, all the characters of the Gulf Coast, you had perfect in the book. You actually talk very well of them compared to some of their lifestyles, but excellent book.
Thank you.
Question? Yes, sir, right here.
Hi, Mr. Curtis.
Hey, good to see another Ole Miss guy who's come to Little Rock, Paul Quinn.
I'm just curious, you said while you were talking that a lot of people who are in the book may not be happy with it now, including Dickie Scruggs. Would you care to kind of continue with that? How's it been perceived in Oxford? I know that there's a lot of the people in Oxford are follow the story, know you, know Dickie Scruggs. Has there been any problems with you? Have you had to move or anything like that?
No, there've been a couple of people who quit speaking to me, but like I ran into Judge Biggers at an Ole Miss basketball game, and some people think that portrait of Judge Biggers is not all that sympathetic, and he spoke to me and I spoke to him. So, by and large, I'm not having any problems with anybody. The book, that it would be so big elsewhere that it has been in Oxford. It was the first book in 17 years that outsold a John Grisham book at both Square Books in Oxford as well as Lemuria and Jackson, the two big bookstores in Mississippi. There's some people who are angry, but some people I thought were going to be angry still speak to me. I don't feel at all threatened. Oxford, as you know, is a very small town. You can't avoid most of these people, nobody has said anything is wrong, which I think is important. I don't care if it makes them mad. You're a journalist, it comes with the territory. You have to expect that you make people mad, and that's fine, but nobody has yet said there's a single thing other than pork chops that's wrong in the book.
Yes, right there.
For us Southerners, this seems uniquely a Southern story, but what has the response been in other parts of the country, or have you had response about corruption in these kinds of networks in other places?
We know it is a Mississippi story, but it is, unlike most Mississippi stories, there's no race involved here. There's nothing remotely Faulknerian about it. It's largely about a bunch of well-educated, wealthy people. As I said, the book has been very big in Mississippi and other parts of the South. It has not been as big elsewhere. There's nothing I can do about that. I wish that it sold as quickly, in New York or Boston or Washington as it has in the South. But it's done very well. It's in its 6th printing now, and the movie rights have been sold also. So we shall see. But it's a story that could have taken place in Minnesota, Massachusetts, California. It's uniquely Mississippi only in that, like Arkansas, we all know each other. Everybody knows people on all sides of the fight.
We have a question right here, this Fluffy.
Hi. I'm wondering how you got the FBI and everybody else to cooperate and give you all their materials, and if there's any way you could teach John Brummett those tricks.
John was teaching me tricks when I met him down here in '92. I would hasten to say I don't divulge my sources, but just to keep the rap off FBI. I didn't get the wiretaps from the FBI. I did talk to some FBI people, but people ask, how did you get the wiretaps? Did you get them through Freedom of Information Act? I said I got them the old-fashioned way. Somebody slipped them to me. An interesting aspect, though, when you bring up the FBI, it's a kind of subplot in the story that the U.S. Attorney's Office in Oxford and the FBI in Oxford hate each other's guts too. Won't speak to each other. Early in the Bush administration, after 9/11 and war on terror started, the U.S. Attorney in Oxford decided to launch something he called the Convenience Store Initiative. And they were going to have a dragnet and round up every Arab or Muslim that owned a convenience store in North Mississippi. And I don't know what situation it is in Arkansas, but hell, almost all of them are owned by people with either a Muslim or an Arab background. And most of them are American citizens. So the FBI objected. The FBI in Oxford said, we're not going to take part in this. And the head of the office in Oxford wrote a letter of complaint to the FBI director in Washington, and they quit speaking with each other. And eventually, the U.S. Attorney's Office had the very FBI agent who complained to the director about indicted him for improper ownership of a building that GSA had gotten to house the FBI in Oxford. Incidentally, for the Scruggs investigation, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Oxford went down to Jackson to the Southern District to get FBI agents there because they didn't trust the FBI office in Oxford. Incidentally, that FBI agent did go to trial and was acquitted, and the government dropped 3 or 4 charges that resulted in a hung jury. He was acquitted on the rest of the charges, and he's now filed a libel suit against one of the prosecutors. So it's yet another very ugly story and very ugly, unpleasant canvas in my book.
You know, yes, question right back here.
I just had a question. As you investigated and prepared and wrote this book, was there anything that surprised you as a native Mississippian about the facts of this case, or the way it all shake out?
You know, I'm an old reporter. I'd like to think nothing surprises me. I was surprised by the extent of, you know, this political network and the power that they had, their ability to fix things. I knew some of this went on. I had no idea it was as widespread. I mean, you know, I knew that Eastland had operatives in every courthouse in every county in the state, but I didn't know that they went to these lengths. And then, you know, we all knew there was a lot of money involved, but I was astonished when I realized how much money was involved. Literally, you know, I told you, literally hundreds of millions of dollars these people are quarreling over. And the book's been described as a portrait of greed, and I think it's more a portrait, though, of hatred. These people despise each other, whether they're the federal prosecutors or judges, the lawyers, who all hate each other. It is a portrait of personal hatred. The hatred is palpable in the story. Yeah.
Let's get this one right here. Hold on just a
He's
minute.
got a follow-up, I think.
I want to make a comment, just for the record. Federal prosecutors here love the judges in this district.
You probably better, Judge. You're staying out of this conflict, okay.
Yes, go ahead.
I was really interested in all of the support that you did get. Do you believe the motivation behind getting all of those integral pieces of information to write the book were basically the hatred
Oh, I
of one
think
another?
in certainly some part, it was, you know, people so hated one other person. I mean, I had stuff coming in over the transom, you know, documents, you know. I've got a lot of stuff I just didn't get close to. I got, you know, poisonous affidavits about activities of all sorts of people. You know, a great deal of it was motivated by hatred. Some of it were, you know, efforts to, you know, exonerate Scruggs or to prove him even more guilty than he wound up being. But as is usually the case, as any of you journalists in the audience know, that, you know, you get stories not so often from your own hard, persistent work. You get it because somebody's willing to drop a dime on somebody they don't like. And you get the phone call saying, you need to go look at such and such on such a page at the courthouse. And same thing's true in this one.
Some of the hatred maybe toward the wealthy and educated as well?
Oh, yeah.
Carlson, you have a question back here?
Mr. Wilkie, let me say Phi Alpha to you first. Thank you. It is a small world. You've spoken a lot about hatred, but I understand from friends in Mississippi that to many people in the state, Dickie Scruggs, despite his crimes and all that he went through, is still viewed by many as a sympathetic character, in no small part due to his large contributions to Ole Miss and to this sort of populist dragon slayer corporate guy that he became. Is that really true, that there are folks in the state that still view him as a good guy?
I think there's no question that there are a number of people who feel that he was basically a victim of entrapment. Doesn't excuse him ultimately getting involved, but Dick, you know, was a very generous guy with his money. He gave $25 million to the University of Mississippi. As far as I know, it's the second biggest gift that we ever got. He's got a lot of friends and supporters who are still very loyal to him. His wife, his son, his grandchildren still live in Oxford. I think they intend to continue to live there once he gets out. No question that he's still got the state in the town of Oxford probably maybe almost evenly divided. People who think he's either a rogue or that basically he was a guy who, you know, did wrong, but people are willing to forgive him once he's paid his, you know, debt to society. So, you know, no question, there are a number of people, I wouldn't say so much that they look up to him as a result of this, because Dick is first to admit that he was guilty. But there are people who are forgiving and remember how very generous he was to charities, to people that you never heard about, that I then began to hear about. People he would just doling out money, never wanted any publicity.
Questions? Bruce?
Curtis, let me start by saying I've only read half of the book, but you mentioned entrapment.
Just so you bought it, Bruce.
You mentioned entrapment a moment ago, and it seemed to me in reading about the first Balducci-Lackey conversation that it was really two conversations. One was, can you do a favor for Dickie and send this to arbitration? And oh, by the way, Patterson and I have formed this law firm, and once you quit being a judge, maybe you'd like to become of counsel. Lackey apparently felt like he needed the quid pro quo in order to go to the U.S. attorney. Did anyone seriously think about challenging? You said later that Lackey was the one that sort of came back with the request for the money. Did Scruggs or anybody seriously consider arguing entrapment and trying to get all of it thrown out on that grounds?
Well, your observation about the quid pro quo, which Lackey read that offer as a quid pro quo, I mean, it's essentially worthless. To be of counsel of this startup firm. I know they got one older judge who had retired, and they were paying him the grand total of $1,000 a month just to have his name on the letterhead. So I think it's pretty far-fetched to think that a judge is going to get involved in fixing a case to serve on this fairly nebulous letterhead for the firm. Now, your second part, Bruce?
Well, Lackey then goes to the U.S. attorney. They have these additional conversations. Nothing seems to come from it. The U.S. attorney says you got to get more aggressive, and Lackey ultimately says, I got these problems, and would Dickie help me out? That seems to me to go over the line between proposing something illegal and responding to something illegal. If a court agreed with that it was entrapment, it would seem like everything that flowed from that could have been thrown out. And I'm just wondering whether Scruggs or anybody thought seriously about pursuing that.
I'm a layman, obviously. It smelled of entrapment to me once I learned all the details. General public was not aware of much of this. I think, Paul Quinn, you covered some of the early stages, and I don't think you were aware of a lot of this by the prosecution. John Kecker, Dick's lawyer, very high-powered guy from San Francisco, explained to me technically why it could not be entrapment, because Judge Lackey was not a federal agent at the time he was doing this. However, Kecker came up with what I thought was a very strong motion. It was called, he was accusing the government of outrageous conduct and asserting that the government created the crime. I tend to think that the government did create the crime. It went before Judge Biggers. Judge Biggers gave them a grand total of 3 hours to hear it, would not let them call Judge Lackey as a witness, and summarily overruled it. So they tried and didn't get anywhere with it. I thought it was a very good motion, and I ran it past some law professors at Ole Miss who all thought there was a certain merit to it.